We now return to the Tragedy Central roast of George W. Bush. To kick things off, I'd like to welcome to the podium a woman of dignity, class, and grace. Unfortunately, Ann Coulter was too busy leaving flaming bags of poo on the doorsteps of 9/11 widows. So we called upstairs to the residential suite of the Mayflower Hotel and asked Laura Bush to come down and join us.
Thank you, Tony. We owe a great debt to Tony for putting his credibility as a Fox News pundit behind the job of White House press secretary. Tony Snow is such a up. He makes Scott McClellan look calculating. Don't laugh, Scott. We only picked you to deflect questions about Ken Melman's sexual orientation. Speaking of White House Johns, I bumped into Jeff Gannon leaving the ladies' room. I was surprised to see he's put on a lot of weight since his last West Wing overnight. I would have thought that gay male prostitutes would be especially fond of crack. Which reminds me, a tell-all book by one of his former sex slaves alleges that Osama is a very big Whitney Houston fan, and that he would be willing to break his color rule to make her one of his wives. Sorry, Condi, some bellicose religious fundamentalists are more open-minded than others. Duke Cunningham sends his regards from the Pokey. The Dukester got a yacht named after him by a lobbyist for securing millions in defense contracts. Condi, what does a girl have to do to get Chevron to name a supertanker after her? I can kid Condi because we're very close. Sometimes I kiss her just so I can remember what George's tastes like. Dick Cheney couldn't be here tonight because of financial security reasons. He's awarding Halliburton a lucrative no-bid contract to rebuild civilization after the apocalypse. I know it sounds like a conflict of interest, but his buddy Scalia said it was okay. Satan outsources to this administration. And speaking of the Prince of Darkness, there's Don Rumsfeld. Don has the gall to call his political opponents appeasers, but he's placated more fascists than a Vichy whorehouse. He's given so many totalitarian reach-arounds, he just had surgery to repair his rotator cuff. That famous picture of Rumsfeld congratulating Saddam Hussein for gassing civilians makes Neville Chamberlain's umbrella look like a lightsaber. Joe Lieberman is here. Of course. Joe kisses George's ass so much, his Secret Service code name is Bidet. We're all pulling for Joe in his Senate race. If he wins, George will appoint Joe Secretary of Defense, and the Republican governor of Connecticut will name a Republican to replace him in the Senate. Then we'll blame the whole Iraq mess on Democrat Joe Lieberman in preparation for Jeb's run in 2008. Still on board, Joe?
You bet.
And finally, my husband George. I joked at the White House Correspondents' Dinner that he once tried to milk a bull, but I was speaking metaphorically. It was Ann Coulter.
Did he succeed?
Let's just say, mission accomplished. To be fair, George had had a lot to drink, and after he was done beating me, he staggered over to Ann and yada yada yada. You may have read in U.S. News and World Report that George likes fart jokes. But who doesn't? I mean, besides my mother, the twins' 4th grade teacher, and Pope John Paul II. I've given George a hard time tonight, but don't worry. Our marriage is based on the strongest of foundations. That a wife shall not be compelled to testify against her husband in a criminal proceeding. Good night.
The Tragedy Central roast of George W. Bush will return with Sean Hannity, Ann Coulter, and a special video message from sex drug tourist Rush Limbaugh.